Hey everybody, so I'm gonna jump into our lecture today. It's gonna be a little bit longer. My goal is like 15 minutes, so let's see how this goes. Also, my daughter is running around, so we might get a very cute interruption from time to time. But yeah, we're gonna jump into where we left off before, which, if you guys remember, Japan was the very first country to show real signs of aggression after World War One, kind of in that like interwar period. They were the first to like really show those aggressive signs, and then um, the rest of the world was watching. And so that is going to be where we're going to pick up. So let me just flip this. I'm shooting for 15 minutes. We'll see how good I am. But yeah, so like I said, the rest of the world was watching what Japan did, and also watching the League of Nations, which, if you remember, they were supposed to be the ones to keep peace and punish countries that didn't adhere to that. And so Italy, if you guys remember, is led by Mussolini, a fascist dictator. Fascism is all about like restoring national pride, using violence to achieve what you want. And so Mussolini is this, dictator of Italy, and he sees the League of Nations fail to do anything to Japan when they withdrew from the League of Nations. And so he says, well, let me test it out. So Italy, if you guys remember, the one country that failed to take over the section of Africa that they wanted was when Italy tried to take over Ethiopia. You guys remember how I told you they were very embarrassed and the rest of the world kind of mocked them for it? Well, fascism is all about restoring national pride, and so Mussolini's like, I'm taking Ethiopia. So Italy, led by Mussolini and his black shirts, they officially take over Ethiopia. So years later, they kind of like try to restore their national pride by taking over Ethiopia. The Ethiopian emperor at the time actually appealed to the League of Nations and said, hey, can you please help us out? Italy is attacking us. The League of Nations did nothing. They said, you know what, Ethiopia is in Africa, it's not, a region in Europe, let's maybe like cut our losses, hopefully we can keep peace. Nobody is really like in any position right now to fight a war, and so hopefully this will just let them kind of like, I don't know, restore their national pride and avoid any more conflict. Guess who was watching Mussolini? Hitler. So Hitler sees Mussolini take Ethiopia and get relatively no punishment at all. And so Hitler says, interesting, let me see what I can get away with. So his first step in 1935 is to openly refuse the Treaty of Versailles. So the Treaty of Versailles said he couldn't have alliances, he couldn't build an army, and a lot of other things. Like they had to pay $33 billion. So Hitler said, we are refusing to pay. We are going to build an army, and we are going to form alliances if we so choose. So he just pretty much says, I'm going to refuse this treaty. Now, the League of Nations sends Hitler a letter and says, hey, Hitler, could you please stop with these aggressive moves? Obviously, you guys can probably imagine, how do you think Hitler responds? He says, a letter, interesting, I'm going to keep going. So 1936, next year rolls around, and Hitler moves his troops into the Rhineland. So if you guys look here, this is Germany in green. This is the Rhineland between France and Germany. This was supposed to be a demilitarized zone that Germany was not allowed to set foot in. It was literally supposed to be a buffer zone for France, because France and Germany were such like enemies, and all the issues that had been caused between these two nations in World War One. Germany was supposed to leave this as a buffer zone. Hitler moves his troops into the Rhineland, and again, waits for the League of Nations to do something. The League of Nations says, hey, Hitler, I see that you moved your troops into the Rhineland. Could you, take them back into Germany? Hitler says, that's not going to happen, and silence from the League of Nations. So that's now Japan, Italy, and 2 moves from Hitler that have gone unanswered by the League of Nations. Literally just like a slap on the wrist. So I want you guys to think about if you were doing something that you shouldn't, and you're not getting any sort of punishment for it, and you happen to have this like ego and power and authority that Hitler does, well, he takes this and runs with it. The reason the Rhineland is so significant is because this is the turning point for Hitler in Germany. So you guys, I want you to think about if you elected somebody to office, or even somebody took over your country, that promised, I'm going to bring jobs, I'm going to restore our national pride, everyone's going to have, better lives. Our economy is going to be better. We're not going to be in debt to all these countries. The world is going to respect us, right? Those are all things that politicians, I feel like, promise a lot. Some of them might sound familiar. But what if you had a leader that came in and actually was following through on those? Because he was preparing for war, it creates jobs. So there were a lot of jobless people in Germany that now had jobs because of Hitler's aggressive moves in preparing for war. He promised to restore national pride, and he openly defies the Treaty of Versailles, which to them was so embarrassing. And he doesn't even get in trouble for it. And so they're like, wow, the world does respect us. And so more and more people buy into this Hitler kind of like persona, because he's kind of getting away with a lot and nobody really seems to be able to stop him. So he gains popularity. Hitler also is now on the offensive, right? So Hitler is no longer on the defensive, he is on the offensive, and it's going to be up to the League of Nations to stop him. But the third thing is it revealed how weak the League of Nations was. They really were in no position to stop him. And part of this is because the United States, if you guys remember, doesn't actually join the League of Nations, which would have made it kind of maybe more legitimate or more powerful. So it revealed that the League of Nations, they were supposed to keep peace, but the question is, could they? So Hitler does not stop there. He, again, remember, he was going to defy the Treaty of Versailles. So Hitler makes a decision in 1936 to unite with 2 other nations. So he unites with Emperor Hirohito, who really was just a figurehead. It was actually just like the militarist leaders of Japan, like Hideki Tojo and some of those sort of like militarist leaders in Japan, and then Mussolini in Italy. So he unites, all 3 of them unite, and they become known as the Axis powers. They say we are the axis on which the rest of the world will turn, is sort of their thing. So you have Mussolini, Hitler, and Hirohito, really Yamamoto, Hideki Tojo, and some of these militarist leaders in Japan. So that is not the only region in the world that you start to kind of see this sort of like active, kind of like aggressive moves. So Francisco Franco, he was attempting to take over Spain. He was also a fascist leader, promising strength and promising to help rebuild Spain. And the reason that I mention this is because he's also a fascist leader. Hitler and Mussolini think to themselves, hey, if the Spanish monarchy falls and Franco takes control, he can easily just join with us and fight with us in World War II. Hitler and Mussolini actually had huge expectations for Franco. He doesn't really follow through, but Hitler and Mussolini send troops and weapons. Like, actually, there's like tanks with like the like Nazi, like the swastika on the side. I mean, they're sending troops, they're sending weapons, they're sending whatever Franco needs to take over Spain. Meanwhile, the democratic nations of the world deny anything is happening, because if they send troops, and Hitler and Mussolini have sent troops from Germany and Italy, it's like potentially World War II. And so all these democratic nations are just ignoring that it's happening. And actually, this picture kind of shows a cool little piece and like moment of history. Is there were actually a lot of just individuals from like Canada and Australia and the United States that were like, screw this. Our countries are denying reality and Spain needs help. And so they actually bought plane tickets themselves, I guess, when you can carry guns, on planes. But they bought plane tickets, brought whatever weapon they had, hopped on these planes, and and flew into Spain and actually tried to help. It didn't end up working. Francisco Franco did take over. And so now you have 3 dictators and like the, militarists in Japan that are really acting very aggressively. And the question is, what is going to be done to avoid it? So Hitler has now defied the Treaty of Versailles. He's moved his troops into the Rhineland. He's formed alliances he wasn't supposed to. He then aids Franco in taking over Spain, and then he takes over Austria. So technically Austria voted to become a part of Germany, but think about who they allowed to vote. So Austria becomes a part of Germany. It's not even like it's an alliance. Like, literally, Austria votes, and I'm saying votes in quotation marks, votes to become literally just a piece of Germany. And the League of Nations, again, desperate to avoid war, week after, because of everything that had happened, because the United States had no interest in getting involved in Europe's affairs again, the League does nothing. So now you have Germany, Austria, you have possibly Spain, definitely Italy, and Japan, that are all looking like they're lined up and feeling very aggressive. And then Hitler says, okay, well, Germany is not big enough. And we want, if you guys remember, his ideas were like race and space. He wanted space for his like master race to spread throughout the world. So you guys can see here, this is the Rhineland that he takes. So already Germany is bigger. Here's Austria. So he's taken that. Germany's looking extra, extra big, right? And then this land in purple, this is the Sudetenland. This is all part of Czechoslovakia, but there were millions of Germans that lived in these regions. It makes sense because Germany's right here. So Hitler argued, I should take the Sudetenland. I should take these pieces of land from Czechoslovakia because they're mostly German people living there anyway, and so they should be a part of Germany. So the League of Nations says, okay, we need to make this official. So they meet in Munich, in Germany. They come to Germany in 1938, and they say, okay, Hitler, we are going to give you what you want. We are going to preserve peace. We're going to give you what you're asking for, but you have to sign on this dotted line and promise to not take anything else. Mind you, at this point, Hitler has taken Austria, the Rhineland, now part of the Sudetenland. He's very popular with his people in Germany. He is this force in the world. And honestly, the League of Nations said, and England and these other nations that came here to at the Munich conference were like, this will be good. If we just give Hitler this, he'll stop. You guys can maybe guess where that's going to go, just because you know history, but this is the policy of appeasement. This word is important moving forward. Appeasement is preserving peace by giving in to your enemy's demands. So they say, let's just avoid war. We'll give him what we want, but he has to promise to not take it any further. So you guys can see Neville Chamberlain was the Prime Minister of England. Here you can see him. He comes back and gives this speech to England, and he says, I believe it is peace for our time. So he is feeling like he won this massive victory. He says, I have preserved peace. Our country is not ready for war, and I've preserved peace by signing this deal with Hitler. Winston Churchill, who was a member of Parliament at the time and becomes Prime Minister next, he was a huge critic, and he said, this is defeat without war. He said, we just lost to Hitler without even fighting him. He also said, this is only the first sip, right? So he said, this is just the beginning. Hitler is not going to stop. The question is that you guys are going to be answering in the assignment that you have this week is, was appeasement the right call? Was it right for them to try to preserve peace by giving in to what Hitler wanted? Or not. So that's what your assignment is. You guys have 4 sources. One is from Neville Chamberlain, one is from Winston Churchill, and then there's 2 additional sources. And I want you guys to read the sources, answer the questions, and then I want you guys to kind of decide, was appeasement the right call? So that is it for today.